What if the very thing you've been building your entire adult life, your net worth, was always meant to betray you right when you needed it most? That sounds dramatic, I know, but hear me out, because the numbers tell a story that most financial advisors won't put front and center.
According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the median household net worth for Americans aged 55 to 64 sits at around $365,000. By the time that same household reaches 65 to 74, it nudges up slightly to about $410,000. So far, so good, right? Decades of hard work, mortgage payments, and retirement contributions are finally paying off. But then something strange happens. For households aged 75 and older, that number drops back down to roughly $335,000. That's a decline of nearly $75,000. And for most families, that gap represents real vulnerability, not just a statistic on a Federal Reserve report.
Now, before you chalk this up to people simply spending their savings in retirement, which honestly sounds reasonable, the reality is a lot more complicated and a lot more concerning. Let's break it down.
Most people assume that wealth declines in old age because retirees are out there living their best lives, taking cruises, spoiling grandkids, and spending what they saved. And sure, some of that happens, but the households experiencing the steepest drops aren't wealthy retirees with fat portfolios making intentional choices. They're families with modest savings, maybe $200,000 or $300,000 total, and only a fraction of that actually sitting in liquid, accessible retirement accounts. The rest?
Tied up in a house they can't easily spend.
That brings us to the first thing most people get completely wrong about building wealth: confusing home equity with financial security. Think of your house like a piggy bank you've been stuffing for 30 years, except someone welded it shut. The money is technically in there, but you can't exactly pull $500 out of your living room wall to pay a medical bill. Yet, for the average American household, home equity makes up roughly half of their total net worth. According to the same Federal Reserve data, that's been true for decades. Here's how it plays out. A family in their late 30s or early 40s has a median net worth of around $135,000. They're juggling a mortgage, maybe some student loans, and the very expensive hobby of raising children. Month after month, they make their mortgage payment, property values slowly rise, and their net worth grows, even if their investment accounts are barely moving. It feels like progress, and in some ways it is. But it's also a bit of an illusion because that growing number on their personal balance sheet isn't going to pay for groceries at 78. By the late 50s and early 60s, that household has climbed to somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 in net worth. Home equity often accounts for a huge chunk of it, sometimes more than half. The retirement account has grown some, Social Security is on the horizon, and retirement feels like a real, tangible thing. This is where the plan looks most promising, right before it either holds up or quietly starts to fall apart. What if I told you the reason most net worths start declining after retirement has almost nothing to do with bad investing, market crashes, or even medical emergencies? The real culprit is far more ordinary. It's the absence of a plan, not a complicated Wall Street-level strategy, just a basic, intentional approach to how money gets spent once the paychecks stop coming in. When income from work disappears or shrinks to just Social Security or a pension, households that haven't planned carefully end up in reactive mode. The spending strategy becomes something like, I'll use my Social Security check and then pull whatever else I need from my savings to cover the rest. Bills come in and money goes out, month after month. There's no real system, no ceiling on spending, and no thought given to how long that portfolio needs to last. This might not sound catastrophic at first, but compound that pattern over 15 or 20 years, and it absolutely is. Here's a metaphor that might stick with you. Imagine you have a water tank on your roof that holds enough water for, say, 5 years. If you use water carelessly, leaving taps running, not fixing leaks, never checking the level, you'll be shocked when it runs dry in 2.
The water didn't disappear because of bad luck. It disappeared because there was no system in place to manage it. That's exactly what's happening to millions of retirees right now.
And the scary part is that retirement can last a long, long time. A 65-year-old American today has a reasonable chance of living well into their 80s or even 90s, according to Social Security Administration life expectancy data. We're talking 20 to 30 years of retirement, sometimes more. Nobody knows exactly how long they'll need their money to last, which means spending without a strategy is essentially flying blind over a very long route. Now, remember, this isn't meant to scare you into stuffing cash under a mattress and never enjoying life. The point is that a decline in net worth during retirement isn't inevitable. It's largely predictable, and more importantly, it's largely preventable. The data shows that the people who see the steepest drops aren't the ones who planned and spent intentionally. They're the ones who never really had a plan at all. So here's the question that actually matters. What does a plan look like, and how do the people who keep growing their wealth in retirement actually do it? Because that group exists, and their approach is more accessible than you'd think. What if I told you that there's a withdrawal strategy built specifically on historical worst-case scenarios? The Great Depression, the oil crisis of the 1970s, the dot-com crash, and it still comes out on the winning side. That's not a sales pitch. That's the story behind the 4% rule, and it's been quietly protecting retirees for over 3 decades. Here's where it comes from. In 1994, a financial advisor named Bill Bengen ran the numbers on every possible retirement scenario going back decades. He tested portfolios through crashes, through inflation spikes, through wars and recessions. His conclusion was this: if you withdraw 4% of your portfolio in your first year of retirement and adjust that number slightly for inflation each year after, your money, invested in a reasonable mix of stocks and bonds, is highly likely to last 30 years or more. Not just survive. In many historical scenarios, it actually grew. Let's make that concrete. Say you retire with $500,000 saved. In year 1, you withdraw 4%. That's $20,000. If inflation runs at 3% the following year, you adjust your withdrawal to $20,600. The year after that, a little more. Your spending keeps pace with rising costs while the rest of your portfolio stays invested and keeps compounding. Think of it like a river. You're drawing water from the surface, but the current underneath keeps flowing and replenishing it. You're not draining the river, you're using it wisely. A lot of people hear 4% rule and immediately assume they'll be white-knuckling it through retirement, terrified to spend $1. That's not the point at all. The point is having a ceiling, a guardrail, so that your spending doesn't quietly outpace your portfolio's ability to keep up. Without that ceiling, spending can creep up year after year without anyone noticing, until one day the tank runs empty faster than expected. With it, you stay in control. And here's something that genuinely surprises most people. The retirees who follow this approach don't usually see their net worth decline. In fact, many see it continue to grow. Bengen designed the rule using a portfolio of roughly 60% equities and 40% fixed income. And even under historically terrible conditions, portfolios following this approach outlasted a 30-year retirement period. The math works not because markets always go up, but because disciplined, modest withdrawals give your investments time to recover when they inevitably dip. That brings up another thing the financially resilient retiree does that most people overlook. They adjust. When markets drop 20 or 30%, they don't panic and pull out. They also don't keep spending as if nothing happened. They naturally pull back a little, maybe fewer restaurants, maybe a smaller vacation that year. And that breathing room gives their portfolio time to bounce back. This isn't some sophisticated financial maneuver. It's just basic common sense applied to spending, and it makes an enormous difference over a 20 or 30-year retirement. Let's be honest about something else, too. Not every challenge in retirement is financial. Some of it is psychological.
After 30 or 40 years of earning a paycheck, it feels deeply wrong to be drawing down savings instead. Some retirees overcorrect and spend almost nothing, living in unnecessary anxiety when their finances are actually fine. Others do the opposite and spend freely early in retirement because I worked hard for this, only to find themselves uncomfortably tight 15 years later. Neither extreme serves you well. The 4% framework gives you permission to spend, just within a structure that protects your future self. Now remember, the people who keep growing their wealth into retirement aren't all millionaires. That's one of the most important things to take away from all of this. They're people who started with a plan, even a simple one, and stuck to it with reasonable flexibility. They stayed adaptable. Many of them continued bringing in some income, even part-time, well into their 60s and 70s. Not because they had to, but because that extra cash, even a few $100s a month, took pressure off their portfolio and gave it more room to grow. A part-time consulting gig, some freelance work, a small side project. These things aren't just income, they're insurance. There's also a mindset shift that separates the people who thrive from the ones who struggle. And it's this: they stop thinking about retirement as a finish line and start treating it as a phase of life that still requires active management. Your financial life doesn't go on autopilot the moment you stop working. If anything, the decisions you make in the first decade of retirement can set the tone for everything that follows, for better or worse. With a realistic chance of living 25 years or more past retirement age, the stakes of getting those early decisions right are higher than most people realize. So, what's the real takeaway here? The Federal Reserve data shows us a clear pattern. Net worth peaks in the late 60s and early 70s, and falls. But that pattern is not destiny. It describes the average, and the average retiree enters that chapter with almost no real plan in place. The moment you decide to be different, to build liquid savings alongside home equity, to follow a sustainable withdrawal rate, to stay adaptable and keep at least some income flowing, you put yourself in an entirely different category. You don't need to be wealthy to do this. You need to be intentional. And the best time to start being intentional is always right now, before retirement forces your hand. Because a plan made at 45 is infinitely more powerful than a plan made at 75. The people whose wealth keeps growing in retirement didn't stumble into it. They built habits, made decisions, and stayed the course. And the honest truth is, there's nothing stopping you from doing exactly the same.